Let's get right into it now to break down campaign 2016 with Washington Post reporter Jenna Johnson, CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris, and CBSN political contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez, who is in Los Angeles. All right, Jenna, let's begin with you. You have been covering the Trump campaign. First things first, there is no traveling press with Donald Trump. Explain to us how that came about.
Well, this whole trip came about at the very last minute. The president of Mexico reached out to Trump and to Hillary Clinton on Friday and welcomed them to come and visit the country. Donald Trump very quickly seized on that invitation. His staff reached out earlier this week to try to set this up, and late last night it became official. This happened very, very quickly. Often these sorts of foreign trips take weeks and weeks of preparation to make sure you have the proper security in place, that reporters from both the United States and from the country you're visiting are able to be there to ask questions, to witness part of the meeting. And like with many things with the Trump campaign, this is happening at the very last minute. There is a charter plane that follows Mr. Trump around on the campaign trail. And, you know, last night when news was breaking that he was going to be visiting Mexico City, that plane went to Phoenix, where he's going to be making a speech late tonight about his immigration policy.
Steve, let's bring you in on this. There is some local criticism for the Mexican president, some asking why he would lend this invitation to Donald Trump and take this meeting. But for Trump himself, shouldn't the candidate get some credit? I mean, President Obama, while he was a candidate back in 2008, met with the leaders of the UK, Germany, Iraq, Jordan, and Israel. And the optics do elevate Donald Trump, a businessman, and make him look like a statesman. So does the Republican candidate deserve some credit for this today?
That's what they're hoping. I mean, that's what they're hoping ultimately is the takeaway from all this, is that he gets this air of gravitas, that he can show that he can be president of the United States, pass the commander-in-chief test. But what's surrounding this visit is he's visiting with the president of Mexico, a country that he has used as a punching bag, basically, for the last, well, since his campaign started in June of 2015. It's been, he's been criticizing people who are coming into this country from Mexico. He's criticized the leadership of Mexico. And now he's going into the lion's den to meet with the current president. And it's just going to be very curious to see. It'd be lovely to be a fly on the wall of that meeting to see what is actually said. But also, I'm just anxious to see what they say afterwards. I mean, there's also the drama of the fact that the president of Mexico himself is not quite popular or very popular at all, really, in his country. And people in Mexico are wondering, why did you invite Donald Trump, of all people, to come and speak to you? So there's just a lot of politics that are involved here, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see both presidents. I'm sorry. President of Mexico.
There you go,
and
it already.
And did I just call him president?
You did.
And the man who wants to be president of the United States, and to see what they say after this meeting.
All right, so Leslie, pardon Steve's Freudian slip there, or perhaps not.
Twitter will love
We're not
that,
ascribing
though.
any
I'm
motives
just
to that, yes. But okay, you're a Republican strategist, Leslie. Does this make tactical sense for Donald Trump right now?
It's a bold move. It's completely unconventional. What is interesting about it, it's very similar to something he did earlier in the year when he accepted an invitation at the last minute from the Border Patrol Union down at the Texas-Mexico border. He boarded a trip, went down there immediately. The city of Laredo, where he stopped, did not have time to get ample security. They had to really kind of marshal their resources. But what we did learn from that trip is while he went in, and then actually the invitation was rescinded, what did happen is he got a better understanding of real life on the U.S.-Mexico border. That's the positive optic what can happen. He's going to really sit face-to-face and potentially start understanding what it will take, especially for a country, just like Steve said, that he spent so much time demonizing.
And if history is any example, Leslie, Donald Trump is likely to hear from the Mexican president that his country will not pay for a border wall and that Mexicans in the United States should be protected. The statement that President Pena Nieto sent out said that he is doing this to develop dialogue and to protect Mexicans no matter where they are. So what should we watch for in Donald Trump's speech? Because his surrogates, including Vice President Governor Pence, the vice presidential candidate, refused to detail how the 11 million estimated undocumented immigrants in the U.S. will be treated. Will there be a deportation force, or will they take a more humane approach? There is more at stake now after this meeting to get some clarification on that, don't you think?
Absolutely. The really important things to keep in mind is there's an estimate, according to the Mexicans, of about 10 million binational or dual citizenship Mexicans in the United States. So there's a significant population. You do have those issues you just raised, but also for any true border security solution requires a binational compromise. It's not only on the issue of guns that are moving from the United States to Mexico, but obviously human trafficking, narcotics, and everything that's crossing a very porous border, in addition to the immigrant problem. But there's also trade and the issues of growth of both economies. What is not talked about is the Mexican middle class over the last several years has really started to grow and has surpassed, particularly in the number of engineers coming out of Mexico per capita, the United States. So the stronger Mexico is, there's less incentive to be moving a lot of traffic across that border. So these are serious issues, and I'm very hopeful we'll hear later tonight if he understands what it will take to solve that problem.
And we should note that President Pena Nieto's approval rating is at record lows at the moment, so there is some domestic political reasons for him to essentially do what he can to confront Donald Trump. Jenna, let's bring you back in here. What do you make of a trip like this happening before a highly anticipated speech from Donald Trump? I mean, you talked about being concerned that there's no press allowed. Couldn't each side spin this private meeting to their advantage?
Yeah, my guess is we could be hearing two very different narratives about what is discussed at this meeting. One of the things that has made Donald Trump so popular in the United States during the Republican primaries was that he gave villains for people to blame their problems on. And he went after those villains viciously. And Mexico is one of those villains that he held up. Blaming economic problems on the country, that Mexico was sending its worst people here, and that is a security threat for the United States. And so today, the day that was supposed to be about him laying out details of where he stands on immigration, we're instead watching him, kind of go to this place that he has criticized so very much and meet with the leaders of that country. It could be an opportunity for him to show, some maturity on this issue. I think that's part of the reason the campaign is hoping that this goes well, that he can look diplomatic and presidential, and that even countries that he's angry at, he can meet with them and talk to them and hear them out. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Steve, last question here. Immigration, of course, is such a hot button issue. Can you explain the challenge here for Donald Trump as he, on the one hand, tries to reach out to moderates in the Republican Party, at the same time trying not to upset those conservatives who would view any kind of quote-unquote softening as a move potentially toward the A word, as Major called it, amnesty?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you remember, during the heat of the primary, he talked about building the wall. He continues to do that. The wall building part of this argument is not going anywhere, and I don't anticipate it will go anywhere. It's been a staple of his speeches since day one. The other part of this, the deportation force, which, again, during the heat of the primary was something that he was using to woo conservatives and to woo Republican voters during a primary. He's been backing off of that significantly, really, since the primaries ended. If you remember, during his convention speech, he said he was talking about dealing with illegal immigrants in a considerate and compassionate way. And then in recent weeks, as you mentioned, he talked about softening. So he is clearly trying to pivot to the general election. The question is how much of a pivot can he afford without losing that base? Now, there's polling out there to suggest that Republican voters agree significantly, in fact, overwhelmingly support the building of the wall. But in terms of how to deal with immigrants who are already here, that are here illegally, they're split on that. So there might be some room for him to actually to move on that part of his immigration plan and not really offend as many people as he would in the base as if he switched on the wall building part of this. So I anticipate you will see him change his tone on the deportation part of it, but we're not going to see him at all change on building the wall.
All right, Steve Chaggaris, Jenna Johnson, Leslie Sanchez, thank you all so
Thanks,
much.
guys.